Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution. And today I want to talk about being radically responsible, about choosing whether or not to be a mother, and more importantly, about how we're choosing to treat our own mothers, because it's Mother's Day 2026. So lately I've been doing podcasts around holidays because honestly, I don't think most of us even know where these holidays come from anymore. We celebrate them because they're consumer based. We buy things. We post things. We think we know what they mean, but we've lost the roots of them. We've lost the soul of them. And Mother's Day, this one hits a little bit personally for me because I'm not a mom. I never had kids. Probably one of the worst questions that I get is, do you have grandkids? Like, how to have kids? They have grandkids. But I don't. And I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to tell a story because over 20 years ago, I was sitting in this spiritual center in Dallas, Texas, and it was on a Mother's Day, on a Sunday, just like this. And there was this moment where they asked all the mothers in the room to stand up. You know how, like, sometimes they ask the military to stand up, but there's only a few of them. Well, I remember sitting there in my chair while what felt like every woman in that room stood up around me. Every single one of them. It was probably one of the loneliest moments. I mean, I start to tear up thinking about it even as I speak because I didn't stand up because I'm not a mother. And in that moment, oof, I remember tearing up then. I felt guilt and shame, like there was something wrong with me. Like somehow I had missed a fundamental initiation into womanhood. Now, whether or not I had children was ultimately my decision, maybe not 100% within my control, but still a path my life took. And I am happy and proud of that path. But when everyone around you is celebrating motherhood and you're sitting there outside of that experience, trust me, you feel invisible. You feel less than. And now, here in 2026, I'm watching this entirely different cultural conversation happening. So there's probably a lot of women that aren't going to have that same experience going forward because there's young women on TikTok and Instagram openly saying they aren't going to have children. There's this rise of dinks, dual income, no kids. Women choosing freedom, travel, careers, and independence. And yes, all of those things come with not having kids. I can assure you, 70 years on this planet without kids, there is a different trajectory that your life takes. There is. And there are so many good things about being a mom and not being a mom. And it's not me who needs to make that decision for you. And today I wanted to have an honest conversation about Mother's Day, not just from the perspective of a woman who never had children, but from the perspective of how we've lost the deeper meaning of this day entirely. Because yes, many women become mothers. Yes, that's our biologically, we're the only ones that can do that. But every single human being on this planet has a mother. We don't come here without a mom. Every single one of us. Now, I'm not discounting the fact that some people have had painful relationships with their mothers. Some mothers have abandoned their children. Some created trauma. And some were absent even while physically present. Been there, experienced that. I got the t-shirt. But regardless, your mother shaped you. I want to say that again. Your mother shaped you in whatever form she showed up for you. So it's important to know that you are imprinted by that mother energy, which is also generational. This experience with or without your mother influenced you. And what's fascinating is when you actually go back and look at the origins of Mother's Day today, it didn't begin as a Hallmark holiday. Trust me, none of them ever do. It began in a spiritual setting, as so many other ones do. If you watch this podcast, every celebration, every holiday really has its foundations in these spiritual settings, in a worship service, a gathering together, a moment of reverence for mothers. And that's not lost on me, considering my own experience happened in a spiritual center. Gee, how interesting. Mother's Day in America was officially established by Anna Jarvis after a church service in West Virginia in 1908. But before that, because there was a buildup to it, it didn't just say, oh, Anna said, let's just have Mother's Day. It came as a result of the 19th century where women's peace groups were gathering after the Civil War because mothers whose sons had fought and died on opposite sides of that civil war were coming together, calling for peace in a peaceful way, by the way. I think it's so interesting that there's so much dissension and protesting right now that turns very violent. Back in the day in the suffragette, when women were protesting, the suffragettes and these peaceful gatherings for mothers after the Civil War, calling for more peace, were mothers bringing that mother energy, which is what we have in spades, that nurturing energy for people that died on opposite sides of that war. Think about that. The origins of Mother's Day are rooted in peace, in healing, in bringing divided people back together through the shared pain and love of motherhood. Wow. And honestly, I wonder if that's exactly where we've lost the plot. I heard recently that I'm just quoting a statistics, I'm not picking an opinion, but the left is so much about not spending holidays with their family, of excommunicating each other because of a political divide. Maybe Mother's Day is the opportunity to bring that connection and that peace back into a family. But now Mother's Day has become another consumer holiday. Of course it has. Flowers, brunch reservations, gift cards, social media posts. I read recently that the Zoomers spend almost twice what baby boomers are spending on Mother's Day right now. Well, maybe because many of their mothers are aging or gone. There's possibility. But it's consumerism. And somewhere underneath the commercialization is this original heartbeat. So maybe that's what you want to practice today: peace, love, reconciliation. And I think we desperately need that right now. So let me say something that's going to ruffle some feathers because, that's what I do. Do not believe that every woman should become a mother. I know that's controversial. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't become a mother or should become a mother. But I've seen too much in this world to pretend something else. Motherhood is a privilege. It's not a requirement for womanhood. It just isn't. And not every woman is meant for it. Honestly, they're not. Now, from a scientific perspective, there's something extraordinary that happens biologically and neurologically and spiritually when women give birth. Absolutely. I watched it with my niece when she unexpectedly became a mother at 18 years old. Something rewired in her brain, which is exactly what happens when women give birth. Scientifically, we know now that that's what happens. Women's brains literally rewire after childbirth when they get their cycle, childbirth, and menopause. It's a physiological, biological mind thing, transformation that happens through nurturing and attachment. Men can never experience that exact rewiring because they don't give birth. They're not built that way biologically. And I didn't experience that rewiring because I never gave birth. I had a friend of mine say to me I was the most selfish person and I didn't realize it until I had a child. It's because the rewiring takes place. So if you don't have kids, you will never have that rewiring. It's okay. It doesn't mean that you're bad or wrong. It just means that there's something that happens biologically when you do give birth. But here's the thing is it's an absolute gift to be able to do that, but it also is something that you need to take as sacred. What I also see is that society has sold women this very impossible expectation from as long as I can remember. Be everything. Be nurturing. Be maternal. Build a career. Run a business. Raise the kids. Compete like a man. Produce endlessly. And oh, by the way, never slow down. And so women have taken that on. And some women do juggle it beautifully. I mean, that's really a juggle. But so many are drowning. And what I also see, and I know this sounds harsh, is a lot of people having children who never learned how to parent. And I'm going to say something really controversial. I've been saying this probably since I was 18 years old. You should have a license to be a parent. Now, that's never going to happen. But the thing is that people don't, and people have said it, parents, I don't know how to be a parent. It's a learn on the job process. And some do it really, really well, and some do it really, really not well. Because giving birth does not automatically make someone emotionally equipped to raise a child. I said it. And sadly, we're seeing the consequences of that everywhere. Kids today have no resilience, zero. Some do. I have to say, I've met some that are really amazing. They don't have respect. They don't have courage. That's really important. And they have no emotional grounding. And this weekend alone, there was another riot involving teenagers in Tampa, Florida. And before somebody says, well, Debbie, that's society. Ugh, society begins in the home. Parents today are raising children inside of their own fear. So, of course, the kids are in fear. Fear creates fragility. I want to say that again. Fear creates fragility. You know, we've been talking about helicopter parents forever. You cannot put your kids in a bubble, which is what so many parents do in the last 20, 30 years. I heard a speaker recently talking about Zoomers, and she was talking to business people and why older generations, which, you know, that's everybody but a Zoomer, perceive Zoomers as lazy or unmotivated. And one point really struck me. It was because many of these kids, these Zoomer kids, were never given opportunities to stretch, to fail. Oh my gosh, fail is a dirty word when it comes to raising kids these days. They are never given the opportunities to take a risk and, more importantly, to develop courage. And I talk about courage all of the time. Courage is a muscle. And so, what we are creating is a generation terrified, literally terrified of life, life itself. Now, I'm not saying this to bash motherhood. That's not what this is. I'm saying motherhood matters so much that we should probably stop pretending it's just automatic. Because raising humans is sacred work. And at the same time, this conversation hits especially hard for me right now because my own mother is 89 years old in very fragile health in a senior center. Luckily for me, a few years ago, I had the privilege of writing a book about her life. I just sat down, like Tuesdays with Maury's. I sat down with her for months and just let her tell stories about her life. And I wrote this book from when she was a little girl up until present day. This was a couple years ago. And just the resilience that that woman had. And I began to see myself so much in her about how she was as a human, as a woman, how I've adopted those qualities. That's why one of the reasons I know that independence, that not being married, that not having kids, I look at her now with immense gratitude and awe for all of that courage because she raised 4 children. She was fiercely independent. And yet, if I'm being truthful, I also still carry wounds from that because when women work, it has an impact on the kids because children interpret everything personally. And I'm not saying don't work. I'm just saying that there's things you can't control because that's what children do. Us as kids don't know the difference between reality and our perception. So then we create stories, the stories in our lives about love, the stories about abandonment, our stories about worthiness, stories that later affect anything and everything from our money, our relationships, our health, and our entire identity. And while my mother gave me independence and critical thinking, as well as really a tremendous amount of strength, I also grew up feeling emotionally unseen a lot. And it wasn't because she was evil, and it's not because she didn't love us, but because she was very much her own person and she was raised a certain way. So I speak to women a lot about generational wounds that we all have. So it was passed down to her that way. And she ended up marching to the beat of her own drum, which guess what? Who else does that? Me. There is a difference between being physically present somewhere and emotionally available, which she never learned how to be. So she wasn't able to give that to me. Now, I compare that to someone like a Rachel Campos Duffy, who's the wife of our transportation secretary. She's publicly raising 9 children, and she appears, although I don't know because I'm not close with her family. She appears deeply intentional about making every single one of her children feel individually loved and seen. And whether that's full reality or perception, it doesn't really matter. It reflects an archetype so many women grew up idolizing. And I talk about this all the time, the June Cleaver image, the devoted mother. And so many of us are still unconsciously measuring ourselves against that. And you will always fail because she was a television character. But here's what I believe now. Every one of us chose our journey onto this thing called planet Earth. I know that sounds radical to some of you. But I believe we all chose this path. We chose our parents. We chose our siblings. We chose our challenges. We chose the lessons our souls need. And somehow, even the pain serves us because I always say everything works in our favor, even the wounds, even the longing, even the absence. And so I'm going to say something else that probably is going to upset somebody. Every woman has the biological choice to become a mother. And becoming a mother, you can do it multiple ways. I'm not here to diminish any of that, but I am also here to say that this biology is a reality. And I think we have become so afraid to speak plainly that we've disconnected from truth itself. It's about returning to the root of Mother's Day. Oh my gosh. So let's do that. The root of Mother's Day is peace. Because isn't it interesting that this holiday emerged during one of the most divided periods in American history? The Civil War. Mothers were grieving sons on opposite sides. Women were trying to restore humanity in a fractured country. And honestly, that feels incredibly relevant right now because every day it feels like this country is moving closer and closer towards another emotional or otherwise civil war. And maybe what we need isn't more screaming. Maybe what we need is what those mothers were trying to create all those years ago: understanding, compassion, humanity, and peace. So today, I celebrate mothers and I celebrate peace. And most importantly, I celebrate my own mother
who probably won't be here for very much longer. But here's the thing I want you all to remember is that none of you would be here without a mother. Not one person on this planet. And maybe Mother's Day is less about perfection and more about gratitude for that woman that brought you into the world. Gratitude for the woman who gave us life. Gratitude for the lessons. Gratitude for the wounds, for the strength, for the resilience, and for the love that they have created for you. And the reminder that this day and its origin was never about consumerism. It was about peace. So happy Mother's Day to anyone who is a mother. But remember, Mother's Day started from peace. So you can be a mother of peace starting today.